From Verdun 1916 to Vietnam 1972, the idea of assisting ground forces with air combat machines has evolved and become doctrine. Today it's called close air support. The requirement for it was recognized before a synchronized gun or a bomb rack was ever bolted to any of these wooden crates, and long before air communications ever became a working reality. Although the United States had not produced a fighter of its own during all of World War I, fighter, bomber, and attack aircraft were developed in their turn. We progressively added range, power, and maneuverability, learning in the process that fighting airplanes could be successfully adapted for a variety of combat jobs. When the Korean conflict became inevitable, the P-80 was already in the Far East and the first to engage the enemy in all jet air combat. It was quickly replaced by the F-84, an assignment that continued to be performed effectively while 86 Sabres concentrated on maintaining air superiority. Even though ground support inevitably became the job of sophisticated high-performance weapon systems, a considerable amount of this work fell to World War II propeller-driven machines whose slower speeds and controllability at low altitudes allowed a particular advantage for close-in ground operations. When the U.S. Air Force entered the air war in Vietnam, it possessed a nearly all-supersonic tactical fighter force. Yet for much of the close support work, the Air Force resourcefully used a number of different aircraft. There were even some brand new approaches. C-47 transports were converted into gunships, and C-119s and C-130s into still larger ones. One way or another, it was this mixed bag of aircraft that accomplished the close support mission. Vietnam was the catalyst which formalized the absolute requirement for a rugged, economical, easy-to-maintain combat aircraft sufficiently accurate, maneuverable, and lethal enough to destroy enemy ground forces, especially armor, without endangering friendly forces. What airplane, then, to work successfully in the narrow confines between friend and enemy? With what firepower? With what handling characteristics? For how long? How safely? How easy to maintain at what total cost over its full life? This airplane, because it consolidates not some but all the characteristics needed to be totally responsive to a ground commander. Because it possesses the characteristics of lethality, survivability, simplicity, and responsiveness. Taken together, these would suggest the A-10, a very sophisticated airplane, but sophisticated it's not. In the beginning, fabrication is simple. No tricky manufacturing. No exotic materials needing forging, heat treating, or forming. At best, a straightforward airframe with single curvatures. Constant chord sections wherever possible. Unusual commonality of shapes and parts, and fewer of them. Major components are interchangeable left and right. The vertical tails, rudders, elevators, inboard flaps, nacelle inlets and aft sections. Even the main landing gear struts are interchangeable. The advantages extend beyond reduction in manufacturing costs to a significant savings in spares provisioning and to a remarkably short recovery time from accident or battle damage. Significant to survivability of the pilot and aircraft is a unitized armor system. The armor, made of titanium, completely surrounds the pilot with protection adequate to defeat enemy ground fire. Proved in actual gunfire tests, the armor system is installed integral to the forward fuselage. Every fuselage skin aft of the cockpit is a single curvature, just cut to size, rolled, drilled, and installed. Protruding head rivets are used on the aft fuselage section. It may be reminiscent of World War II construction technique, but it's practical, and it's less costly. Manufactured in 3 sub-assemblies, then spliced together, the fuselage features the use of troughs, which will allow the speedy installation of hydraulic tubing, electrical wiring, and control lines. This approach also provides easy access for inspection, maintenance, and battle damage repair. From the start, the philosophy for this specialized close air support airplane was manufacturing simplicity, repeatability, commonality, and it comes out that way. This is where cost effectiveness begins. Survivability is the essence of A-10's character, and it's ensured in many ways. The close air support mission relies on the airplane's ability to operate in withering ground fire for long periods of time at the low altitudes required for visual target identification. Survival for the pilot is paramount, and his odds are remarkably improved because he finds himself confidently shielded with titanium armor and covered with a large bullet-resistant glass windscreen. He looks through a canopy that allows excellent visual contact with the combat environment outside his cockpit. His primary control system is hydraulically operated, but the airplane can be manually flown. It's a redundant system so arranged that a high explosive shell is not likely to sever its widely separated control cables running down both sides of the fuselage. An airplane responsive to the power, range, loiter time, and fuel reserves needed for effective close air support necessarily carries a large amount of fuel. A-10 fuel is consolidated on the aircraft center of gravity in wing center section integral tanks and in fuselage self-sealing bladder tanks. The fuel is protected by a system using foam-filled tanks and wraparound fire-inhibiting foam. At a special facility, the Air Force Ballistics Laboratory conducted tests against enemy gunfire using representative specimens of fuel-carrying sections of the fuselage and wing. To approximate the realism of ground gunfire hits, the specimens were located above the gun and in the path of high-velocity air that simulated the aircraft slipstream in flight. This hit was made on an unprotected fuselage specimen. Against the same test, the protection system of this fuselage specimen successfully suppressed explosion and minimized fire. Similarly, the protection system in this wing specimen suppressed fire and explosion. A-10's engines also enhance survivability. High up, out of the way, they are free from foreign object damage. Kick up less ground debris in the least prepared of working environments. Their up-canted tailpipes help even more. So positioned, they are less susceptible to ground fire, getting considerable protection from wing and tail. These surfaces also providing effective masking from infrared sensors. Their hot sections are not only well away from all the airplane's fuel, but their chances of ingesting gases from the airplane's internally mounted 30mm gun are minimized. These, incidentally, are new technology fan jet engines with good growth potential. Already proven, they have been qualified by the Navy for long-endurance overwater submarine surveillance operations. By designing multiple load pathing into its primary structure, the airplane will absorb major battle damage, even to the loss of a large section of wing or ailerons, rudder or elevators. Not only because its structure is rugged overall, but because the airplane is so aerodynamically stable. Necessarily, the most effective close air support, especially against moving targets, must come through visual contact from a very stable gun and bombing platform. Since the A-10 is designed to operate on a visual basis under extremely marginal weather conditions, below 1,000-foot ceilings and 1-mile visibility, it can be successful under these circumstances because it is agile, has a tight turning radius of about 1,000 feet, and a range of delivery airspeeds from 150 to over 400 knots. Its very generous speed brakes, realized by splitting its ailerons, gives the airplane great flexibility in matching constant dive speed with dive angle for best accuracy depending on the ordnance carried, weather conditions, and the ground battle environment. By coupling the ability to see out of this rugged airplane with a good range of delivery speeds and tight turning ability when fully loaded, the A-10 can remain close to the target and attack it rapidly and frequently, allowing the average pilot to respond quickly and confidently to changing battle situations. Its unprecedented lethality comes from almost unlimited ordnance flexibility. Massive firepower is provided by a tank-killing 30mm cannon capable of rates of fire as high as 4,000 rounds per minute. Carefully developed at every step of the way, the GAU-8A has been fully demonstrated in the A-10 close air support aircraft and can be employed without any adverse effect on the handling or maneuverability of the aircraft. A single load of 28 500-pound bombs can be hung on its 10 store stations, or it can manage 24 500s and a combination of rockets and flares. Maverick missiles enhance its lethal firepower even more. The Maverick is a terminally guided anti-armor weapon with greatly improved hard target penetration. Its warhead size sufficient to assure a catastrophic kill. Able now to loiter for long periods and work in marginal weather with a very flexible choice of ordnance, and a lot of it, the A-10 pilot can be very responsive to the field commander in a wide variety of combat situations. He can work in close to friendly troops with good accuracy and double back quickly to re-attack if necessary. Responsiveness also means returning to a short and unprepared airstrip, being serviced, rearmed, and made available again in the shortest period of time. The length of the airfield will determine the ordnance and fuel load combinations. But this close air support machine with its STOL characteristics will operate into and out of a forward airstrip if necessary, and will never need one longer than 4,000 feet to operate at maximum gross weight. There's 17.5 feet between its main struts, providing good ground handling and stability on rough surfaces. The main landing gear is a short, rugged, simple gear, which will allow operations under extremely soft surface conditions, which may be expected at forward airstrips. The A-10, with an enthusiasm for flying, will spend less of its time being maintained and serviced than any previous fighter. In the most practical sense, the A-10 is a tough airplane, conscious of its turnaround time, its block time, if you will, from battle to battle, conscious of convenient servicing, stand-up maintenance, access to things needing routine service, access where it does not interfere with efficient loading of gun and underslung ordnance. Conscious, too, that turnaround can be accomplished with a bomb loader and a stepladder. It's an accurate machine with inordinate strength, load capacity, and weapon flexibility that brings unprecedented force levels to targets close to friendly operations, all in the most marginal weather, reliable and responsive to field commanders in dynamic ground warfare situations.
The A-10 is an easy airplane to fly. It's a safe airplane, and in fact, it's a fun airplane to fly. The A-10 does not display any of the undesirable flight characteristics, such as pitch-up or departure. The aircraft handles very well with a very large load, as well as with an asymmetric load condition. And the beauty, of course, with the A-10 is that it can operate off short, unprepared forward airstrips.
You can fly it through the entire spectrum of the attack profile maneuvers, with minimum control effort. An interesting and rather important point here is that this characteristic does not change significantly with an increase in gross weight. It tracks accurately both in the gunnery and bombing profiles with none of the pitch or directional oscillations that characterize most of the attack aircraft I've flown in the past. This I consider quite significant because in operating at low altitudes and under reduced weather ceilings, a pilot has a minimum amount of time in which to acquire the target, roll in, stabilize, and release his weapon.
We've asked for that balanced combination of configuration, cost, and capability considered necessary for a close air support airplane, and to optimize them all in a single machine with a clearly identified purpose. In final analysis, we've asked a single airplane to take on the toughest job assigned to any fighting machine in recent history. Now in the A-10, we have that machine, designed to cost. The first fighting aircraft to prove this concept. The A-10 is a breakthrough in the cost effectiveness of close air support. A machine that is agile, lethal, accurate, and economical. When you consider that it has all the earmarks of a long, effective life, that's not bad either.